Defining psychology through time. So this will go with a graphic organizer in your knowledge and skills packet. You'll see 4 boxes. Each box, you're going to summarize each bullet point in that box. So first, how does psychology start? So psychology started first with studies focused on consciousness, right? Awareness of oneself and environment. So that is Wilhelm Wundt and the student E.B. Titchener with the whole introspection and structuralism. That's William James with functionalism. And then that's Sigmund Freud, with his psychodynamic theory, right? So it's all about the conscious or unconscious mind. From there, things shift in the 1920s and 60s, and the focus is on behaviorism now. All right, so this was a term coined by John Watson. He's the one that did the baby Albert experiment. And then the most famous behaviorist was in Skinner. He's the one that trained the pigeons and rats to do all the crazy little things. All right, so with behaviorism from the 20s to the 60s, the view that psychology should be an objective science and should study behavior without reference to mental process. So they're like, we don't know what's going on inside your mind. We can only, focus on what we can actually see. That's objectable, right? So, this unconscious desires, this introspection, we don't really know what's going on there. So the shift focused to behaviorism, and it only focused on actions that you could actually see. Then in the 1960s, the focus changed again to mental process, and especially it focused on all the different things that we can do with our minds and the testing of mental abilities. So we wanted to see how far you could stretch your mind during this time period. One of the tests that they did was LSD. If you guys have heard of that before, it's a very strong hallucinogen drug, all right, hallucinogenic drug. So they would take that, and they wanted to see how far your mind can stretch. And actually, they've actually brought that back, and they have testing on it now in very small dosage, though. And then lastly, where is psychology today? Psychology today is defined as a scientific study of behaviors and mental processes. So we focus on your actions, but we also focus on how the mind works. And we're able to do this a little bit better nowadays because of the technology we have, and we can actually see your brain working with like PET scans and MRIs, and we'll get into that a little bit next unit. And you're going to see this throughout the year where you have these different theories, and the modern theory that we use is almost always a combination of 2 of the other theories, 2 or more actually. So these are the approaches or perspectives, which is pretty much the same thing. These are the 7 main ones I will focus on. Your book or other things you look at might have more, but these are the 7 I'm going to focus on that will be on your test. And so you'll also have handouts on these, and you'll have some homework assignments to go with this where you have to apply this. Because we have there's different psychologists, and each psychologist might look at things from a different perspective, right? So you might have biological psychologists, behavioral psychologists, cognitive psychologists. So you're going to have to say, how would they approach each problem, or how would they explain each problem? So first we have biological psychologists. So this approach, they show how the body and brain enable emotions, memories, and sensory experiences. So they would be like, if there's a problem and someone has a certain issue, they're going to look at, do they have a chemical imbalance? Is something wrong with their brain? Did they inherit these characteristics? So one of the handouts that I will give you is like a perfect kind of like cheat sheet. So you kind of like fill in the blank for whatever the scenario is. And, there's keywords you're looking for each one. So this one you're looking for like, chemicals, like neurotransmitters, brain, genetics, things like that. Behavioral approach, the next one, is how we learn observable responses. So we've talked a little bit about that before. So some of the key things you're looking for here is, how were they trained to act this way? Did they learn this from like rewards or punishments? Were they conditioned to act this way? Cognitive, so cognitive is thinking, right? So it's all about how we encode, process, store, and retrieve information. So pretty much this is how you interpret a situation. So a cognitive psychologist is looking how someone is interpreting certain situations, right? How they process that information, the thinking about it. Evolutionary is how the natural selection of traits promoted the survival of genes. All right, so this is Darwin. So the key word here would be survival. So they're acting a certain way for survival. Humanistic is how humans can potentially obtain personal growth. So this is like the most positive of the perspectives. So it's all about becoming a better person. Psychodynamic, this is the Freudian approach. It's how behavior springs from unconscious drives and conflicts. All right, so something deep down that you're not even aware of is driving you to act a certain way. And lastly, we have the social cultural approach. This is how behavior and thinking varies across situations and cultures. So this is how one culture will approach a problem versus another culture. And it could be like big cultures, like ethnicities, or it could even be smaller cultures like one neighborhood versus another neighborhood. All right, because each neighborhood is going to look at a problem and they might look at it differently based off their cultural experiences. And lastly, we have psychology subfields. So just like the approaches, your book or other things might have more subfields, but these are the main 5 ones I will be focusing on that will be on your test. So first we have basic research. This is science that aims to increase the scientific knowledge base. So if there's like a new topic out there, we don't know a lot about it, we just want to do research on it just to learn about that topic. So that would be basic research, right? Just there's a new topic, we don't know a lot about it, we need to find more about it, and so we're just doing general research to find out more information. That's basic research. Applied research is study that aims to solve a practical problem. So there's a problem out there, and now you're doing research to solve that problem. Where basic research, there's not a problem, it's just a new topic that we've kind of discovered, and you're just trying to find out general information about it. Applied research, there's a specific problem you're trying to solve. So obviously a lot of students get these two confused because they both have research in them. So make sure you know the difference between basic and applied research. Clinical psychology studies, assesses, and treats people with psychological disorders. So these are therapists or psychologists who focus on people with mental disorders like bipolar, depression, schizophrenia, things like that. Where counseling psychologists, they assist people with problems in living and achieving a greater well-being. So this is more of your family therapists, couples therapy. You don't necessarily have a mental disorder, you're just going to see the psychologist or therapist for, your general well-being, just to kind of better yourself, to deal with some issues you might be having. Now, clinical psychologists can also see those people, right? But they just focus more on people with mental disorders. Usually they have a higher degree also. Usually some type of doctorate, maybe a Psych, something like that, where a counseling psychologist might have one, or they might just have a master's degree. And lastly, we have a psychiatrist. All right, key difference with this is they can prescribe medicine because they are a medical doctor. All right, they also focus on people with mental disorders, right, with bipolar, depression, schizophrenia, things like that. But they have a medical degree, so they can prescribe medicine. If you notice that Venn diagram that you have in your knowledge and skills packet, that's the key difference between the two. Right, they can prescribe medicine. Now, some states have tried programs where clinical psychologists can also prescribe medicine. You have to go through a very rigorous program, like 850 hours of clinical work, but it's still not a doctorate. All right, it's still not a doctorate. Sometimes psychiatrists might get a bad rap because they're known as pill pushers, where people go to them just to get medication to medicate themselves, when really that should be a last option. All right, so you should try to work out your problem first. If that doesn't work, then you prescribe medicine. Now, some disorders are very serious and you need the medicine, like because if you have a chemical imbalance, the medication can help balance that, especially with something like schizophrenia. All right, and so that is the end of the history notes for psychology.